Hello, hello. Are you guys still there? So we ran into some issues. I ran into some issues with the tablet, but I think it's all fixed. Just had to restart the computer. Haven't done that for a while. Let me know if you can see me, if everything is working fine. Cool. Hi again. All right. Yeah. Sorry about that. I don't know what's going on with my computer. I had to restart the whole thing. Um, all right. So basically, what I just did here, I just split the extra piece of geometry that I created with the curves. So I have these two pieces separately now. And all I want to do is just create some thickness for that, mesh them together, and that just fill that hole. You can do that with sculpting brushes as well. Um, and it could be just a very easy way to do it. I'm going to show you a couple of techniques. Again, like I said, I'm probably doing these, I'm over exaggerating a bunch of processes, but you might find some of the techniques useful and learn some of the some stuff that you might not tried or you might not have tried before. So that's the whole point of this. I'm just gonna select my C modeler, give these guys some thickness as well to the whole thing. There we go. That's all I need. Cool. So I'm going to select just these two, just turn these two, and I'm going to select that one, and with the move brush, just going to make sure I have enough geometry here to fill those areas. Alright, so something like that is cool. It's also there as well. Now I can go ahead and merge these two together. So merge down and do another Dynamesh. Okay, so you could have already you could have done this as well with just sculpting brushes, and like I said, there might be an easier process to do this than what I just did, and there is actually. It's just that I want to try something different. So cool. Now what I want to do is just assign a single polygroup, maybe use the smooth brush to smooth things out a bit. And the other thing I want to do is turn on the body, right? So you'll see I have these areas where the kind of like the geometry is being is intersecting. So what I want to do is select the projection brush. So that's another part of the technique that I wanted to show. Where is it? So P for projection. I think it's projection. No, forgot the name. So it should be C project. There we go. So this one right here. So C project is just gonna take a look at your subtool, and it's gonna try to match or fit it around the contour or the surface of the other subtool. So if I just press here, it's just trying to match this with the underlying geometry. However, I'm not trying to push it in, I'm just trying to stick it out. So I'm gonna hold the Alt key, and you'll see how some of this geometry is getting closer to the underlying geometry, which in this case is the body. Okay, I'm gonna do the same thing here. And that is about it. I mean, it's not perfect. We just don't do that. It's not grading here. Now reduce my brush size and do it from this angle, holding Alt. All right. Perfect. So now I can go into solo mode or turn this one off, and you'll see we have these areas covered as well. So I'm gonna hold Control, click and drag, and that just creates another Dynamesh. And now we can go with maybe the clay brush, and I'm just gonna fill in those areas. So probably at this point we can just turn off the polyframe, and this is what I'm going to do with this brush. So again, just keep in mind that all I'm doing at this point is creating a good base to produce the mesh, or the how do you call it, the coat or the gown, whatever this piece of cloth is going to be. So I'm just using the clay brush here to fill in those areas, because they're going to be covered by, you know, the shape of these clothes. Smooth things out a little bit as well. And I think maybe here we also have to do something similar. I mean, this could definitely be simplified. You can just bring in a ball of clay or just a sphere, use the move brush to set it in place, and then use this same technique that I'm using right now to fill in the areas, and then you can just grow it from there. The only reason I'm doing it this way, not only to show you a different technique, but also I want to keep some lines straight, and when we create the clothes that we're going to create, it's just going to have some areas that are already pretty well defined to create the wrinkles and the folds. So this one is going to be an interesting one, because I want to have something going from this point to this point, kind of like, oh, I lost my epic pen. Anyway, so sort of like from this angle to here. So for that we can try doing, I'm going to try the curve bridge again. You know what, I'm just going to stay away from that, and append a sphere. So let's go to append sphere, select that one. Actually, I'm going to delete this one. I'm just trying too many different things at once. I'm just going to do another one, but it's going to be a cube. It's just going to be easier to maintain straight lines with a cube. Right, so I'm just going to try to position this cube kind of from there. Right, and I just want to make sure I have a semi-straight line between this point of tension of the arm and the rest of the body. Right, so now I can take the move brush and this is going to help me create that illusion of the tension point here in the clothes. So don't worry, this is still super sketchy, and we're going to move faster with a different technique in after this one. I'm just going to push this in, use the smooth brush. It's a separate subtool, right? Let's move this so that we don't have weird gaps. Again, just trying to create a solid piece here that we can then extract a more accurate shape from. Right, so if you had, like, let's say a character in a T-pose and you just want to create a t-shirt, just probably, right? Use the smooth brush really quickly to smooth these areas. Hopefully you can see where I'm going with this technique. With the clay brush, we can just soften this as well. So you'll see that bit by bit, this is starting to look a little bit like the clothes, hopefully. But we're gonna fix it even more, like make it a little bit better. But this helps us with the folds and have an idea where the tension points are, and make sure that it looks a bit more interesting and realistic, or more accurate, really. Let's have a look at the back as well. Just adding a bit of volume wherever there is some gaps. Alrighty, so I think that is about it, really. That's all I wanted to do for this one. I mean, in terms of volume. Just gonna refine this a bit more quickly. Cool. So now that we have the base, so this is going to be in the originals. So what I'll do is I'm going to duplicate that, put it into my OR file folder, and then we have this one that we can use to extract everything. So I'm just going to smooth things out a bit. They don't look as blocky. Cool. And let's go ahead and select the mask lasso, and I'm going to start masking the areas that I want to create this gown. Let's just call it gown. So hold Control, right, something like that. Maybe from this angle. That I don't want to make it like perfect. All right, let me just turn on the character so I can really see where this is going. So maybe we need a bit more over there. Cool, so I think you're getting the idea of what I'm trying to do here. We needed to have this shape in order to extract a more accurate, piece of clothes that conforms to the body. Okay, so I'm just gonna invert the mask here, and we're gonna mask out this area. Do one last check. Everything's looking all right. Cool. And let's go ahead and do an extract of these mask areas here from the extract subpalette. But this time I want to have it at 0, so I don't want to have any thickness. I want to work with single-sided polygons. Extract this, and click Accept. Perfect. Alright, so all that complicated process that we did was just to generate this single piece of clothes. Okay, but it's a single-sided polygon, and it's kind of conforming to the shape of the character. So let's go ahead and clear the mask. So this is kind of like a Nanomesh still. So before I do anything, I'm going to hold Shift, and I'm going to try to smooth this part of the neck. In fact, smooth stronger will be easier. So that this is my go-to smooth brush when I'm working with clothes or like open geometry and stuff like that. I always use smooth stronger. Just allows you to work way faster. Great. So now that we have this, let's go ahead and turn that into a useful piece of geometry with the ZBrush. So let's go to the ZBrush. I forgot to turn on half, but let's just wait and see what ZBrush gives us. And I'll check the chat in just a second. So Samper is asking, hi Pablo, which would you say is the best way to do feathers on a production model that is going to be textured, Mari substance? It will depend on the polygon count, I would say. The most realistic feather you can get will be probably with fiber mesh, but that's not a way that you can texture. So maybe just using a combination of mesh extraction and just cards, like hair cards, you can get a pretty good result. So just a series of flat polygons that you can create UV maps for, and then you can create a super realistic feather, even just a photograph with alpha, and that will give you a pretty good result. Otherwise, if you're gonna have like very close shots to whatever you're working on, maybe it's better to actually model the feather. Not sure. Depending on the project, really. Okay, I'm gonna use the legacy here just because I'm not entirely happy with this. You see the legacy just give me a better distribution in this area. Perfect. So this is all the complicated process that I showed you was just to create this. But if I go to this character, now you can see it just kind of like makes sense. Everything is flowing properly. The clothes feel like it's, they have some weight and the gravity is fine. So let's go ahead and take the move brush, make sure that AccuCurve is enabled. We're just gonna refine these shapes. So I want to create some more pointy areas, like so. And of course, let's go ahead and refine this bit as well. Just want to make it a bit longer. And don't worry too much about the topology. This is, again, it's not the final one. We're just adding a bit of refining the shapes really before we actually create the proper topology. All right. Now, another thing that I would like to do is maybe create kind of like the hole here for the neck. But that's just something that we could do afterwards, I think. Maybe let's do that now. And that could be as easy as just selecting some polygons with or creating a mask, really. Let's just do it with a mask. So it's gonna be not a perfect circular hole, it's gonna be like a poncho type of thing. So something like that should be fine. Control W to assign a polygroup. Select that polygroup and we're gonna delete hidden. Cool. And then we can bring in the polish by groups to make sure that we have a cleaner version of this hole. And then we can just obviously refine this a bit. Cool. So that is looking all right. And of course, because we use the polish by groups, we lost some of the sharpness of the silhouette that we created before. So very quickly, just refine that again. All right. Let's push this forward so there's no intersection of geometry. And let's go ahead and do another series measure. So I'm gonna make sure that the legacy is on, just because it gives me a better flow for these organic shapes. See what that gives us. Cool. And as you can see, the series measure gives us a pretty decent topology here to work with. This might not be ideal, this point here, but I don't think there's gonna be too many wrinkles in this case. So, in this area. So it's all good. I'm happy with this. If anything, we can just do another one. Maybe not half. Let's just undo. Let's try it again. But I'm gonna just do a series measure without the half. I don't know why it's reducing it. Keep it the same. It's similar. Okay, maybe this one is better. All right, let's go ahead and move on because we lost a few minutes with all the crash and the restart of the computer and all that. So I'm gonna move a little bit faster here. So now that I have this here, all we have to do, probably, let me just bring everything back on. Right, so we can start working on, adding some details and the folds and all that. So this is gonna be my thinking is that it's gonna be like a piece of clothes that is put together by other pieces of clothes. So I might just wanna cut it into 3 or 4 parts, and that's just to make it a little bit more interesting. And so we can have like different lengths and so on. So let me just show you what I mean. So I'm going to do a similar process of what I did before, which is select my lasso, and I'm going to hold Control and Shift, and I'm just going to draw a shape like that. Cool. So assign a polygroup there, Control W. So the idea is that this piece is kind of like sewed together, you know, that the character himself put it together. So that would be one. I think the green one is kind of working. Maybe let's hide. Oops. Let's go ahead and do another one here. Control. Hang on. Yeah. Control W. So I have three polygroups: the purple one, the green, and the light green. So those are going to be three pieces of clothes, or like, you know, the same material but like put it together like pieces. And maybe another one here actually. Oops. Something like that, and Control W. Cool. So now we have a bunch of you know, polygroups. So we're going to have to do another series measure, and we're going to use the polish by groups to simplify this a little bit. And then what we can do is just split everything, split all of this together, and work separately a little bit more, a little bit easier after we do the folds and all that. So just before we get started, so that we have a cleaner set of polygroups and lines, what I want to do is do a polish by groups again, but I want to keep the sharpness of the outer edge. So for that, a simple way to do it would be to go to the C modeler, hover over an edge, right click on it, and I'm going to select crease, and I'm going to select edge loop complete. So if I click on this, ZBrush is going to take that entire loop and it's going to crease it. When I do the polish by polygroups, it should respect this. So I'm going to do it all around. Maybe here for the neck as well, although it's just a single polygroup, but you know, just in case. Cool. So let's see if that works. So go to 1 second, restore custom UI. There we go. Huh. I lost my custom palette. Alright, so it's here in the deformation palette anyway. Just polish by groups. So push this like so. So it is still doing it, although it's crisp. So let's go ahead, try a few things here. Polish by features. I think I'm gonna still have to clean this up anyway. So let's polish by groups, and then we just sharp this again. Alright, so move brush. Just sharpen these bits. Alright, so I think that's pretty much all I wanted to do. Having these polygroups so that we can select them later on. And let's go ahead and series mesh everything, but this time I'm gonna keep the groups, and I'm gonna leave the smooth groups as at 1. Also, I'm gonna leave the poly count at same, so that doesn't change much. Let's try this out and see what happens. Do you keep using the legacy 2018 remesher for organic stuff? Yes. So sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes I feel like that organic stuff, I don't know, the topology is a little bit better. The series mesher, the new one, is fantastic for more specific stuff, like or like hard surface stuff. But for organic, I just like to try both. The first thing I will try would be the normal the new 3.0, but it's a great thing that they left the legacy there, and that's just because, you know, people have different workflows. I guess that's the whole point. Alright, so you see that we have a pretty decent geometry or set of polygons and a good arrangement of polygons to start with. So I'm going to duplicate that one as well, and at this point we can just push this one here as well as that one, right? So I just have them in the original folder, all the pieces that we worked together to create. And this guy, because of the zero measure, we just need to fine tune really quickly these polygons. Now for clothes, what I like to do is always work with a open geometry or a single-sided, well, yeah, single-sided polygon without any thickness, and that is just gonna make my life much easier. Cool. So now that we have this in place and it's looking all right, we can go ahead and subdivide and do a few sculpting passes just to get it right, and then we can just split it and play around with a custom brush to put them all together, and yeah, hopefully then we can do the fiber mesh. I think we can still have time, and due to the complications, the technical issues, we'll see if there's nobody after me, we can keep going. I don't have to be anywhere today until 12, so I can spare about half an hour more if you guys are interested. Cool. So I'm going to do not duplicate, sorry, subdivide this. So I'm going to divide this a couple of times just so I have a little bit more geometry, and I'm going to select my it's really hard without the custom palette. It's going to work a little bit slower. Yeah, for some reason. Anyway, so I'm going to select the damp standard brush, and this brush is just great to be able to establish what the folds are going to be, right? So I want to have kind of like with Alt, I'm just going to select I'm just going to do like a little point here, right? And that's just going to be a good reference for me, same as this one, to know what the tension points are going to be. So now I have these two, and obviously this whole arm is just another tension point. But from there, that's where the folds are going to start, or that's where I'm going to start creating the folds. So from this tension point, simplify it a little bit, I'm going to start pushing and pulling areas. So holding the Alt key, it's going to push this out like so, right? So this is going to be a fold. Maybe not from this angle, from this angle here, right towards the elbow. And then we can do the same thing, just creating some other lines like so, right? And here is where things start to become a little bit more interesting. Just always think about the tension points. And I go a little bit more in depth on how to set this up and a little bit about the theory behind creating these folds in the clothes and drapery course, but this is essentially the theory behind it. Making sure that you establish the points, those tension points first, and then you can just run with it and play with the different shapes. So all I'm doing is with the damp standard brush, holding the Alt key and establishing the first points of tension. And with the normal behavior of this brush, you can just push things in. So it's pretty handy. It's going to be a pretty good one here between this tension point and like the belly of the character. It's going to Solomon. Oops. Let's do a quick save just in case. Just interested, do you have any tutorials on your skin alpha brushes? Thank you. Not any tutorial, but the brushes are pretty self-explanatory. I think if you go to the ZBrush Guides website, in the actual landing page of those brushes, you can see some examples of how they use. I'm actually going to make one just so that it's easier for you guys to see what I intended to do with the brush. Marlon Muñoz, he's just an amazing likeness sculptor, and all-round great artist, but he's amazing with likeness. So he he took those and he did the Morpheus. I don't know if you saw him, the Morpheus likeness with the brushes, and he just points out and explained which ones he used and stuff like that. And that's also in the website. All right, so maybe hopefully you can see what I'm trying to do here. Let's go ahead and do a couple more. So every time that I create a piece of wrinkle or anything like that, I'm just making sure that I'm respecting the tension points, so that that they feel more realistic. So hopefully what I'm trying to do with these points and these curves. And this is why the damp standard brush is fantastic for this. It's really easy to just establish these folds. And I have the smooth strong geometry as the smooth strong brush, so that I can fix all of these areas relatively quickly. So these ones are compression folds, and there's really no compression here other than the character lifting the arm a little bit. So I'm gonna have to soften this a bit more. And these ones that are like kind of like curved, you can see the difference. Again, I go in way more depth in the course that I have about clothes, but you can see that some straight lines, those are the ones that go from the tension points, from a tension point to an area that it doesn't have any tension point. In other words, that is kind of like free, like in this area here. So those are or tend to be straight lines like this one, right? From a tension point to an area like so. But there are also these type of folds that are more kind of like a drapery folds or gravity folds, which go between two tension points. So when these two tension points, let's say like the two shoulders are not tense, and the clothes is like bigger in this case, there is a tension point in here and another one in here. So between these 2 points, this type of clothes is going to create this drapery, which makes it look very interesting. But again, just whenever you do clothes and things like that, always there's a few things that you need to keep in mind. Obviously, look at reference. I should look more at reference in this case, but if you have the kind of like the compression, sorry, the tension points established, like I did at the beginning, and that's the whole reason I created this complicated process to start with this base mesh. Then it's going to be easier to know where the compression faults are, the drapery is, and so on. But if you know what those points are, it's just going to be easier for you to set them up. All right. Yeah. So another important thing to consider when you're doing this type of thing like clothes is that, well, I guess apart from the points, the tension points, the drapery, and the type of folds, is to know exactly what material you are working on. So I want to do kind of like a leathery type of material. So the folds that I create right now, they may be a little bit too soft for a leather. So in other words, this drapery here is more kind of like for a cotton material, right? The leather is a little bit the resistance and the structure of the material is a little bit stronger. So those are the things that I will keep in mind when I do this type of thing. So a leather might just go like this, and it has memory folds as well, so you can just do this type of thing. So let me see if it's alright. right? So you can have this drapery, but there is going to be more resistance of the material. So those are the type of things that you want to keep in mind when you're doing this type of clothes and working with with any type of organic clothes or accessory. Alright, so another thing I want to do is bring in my clay brush. So let's go ahead and select the clay brush, and I'm just going to fill in. So this one is again very sharp for the type of material that I'm going for. So I'm just going to fill in those gaps so that it feels stronger. Again, that there is more resistance of the material. And for the most part, any wrinkle or any fold, not wrinkle, fold created with a more stronger material is just gonna make sharper lines like I have here. Alright, I'm gonna just take a second here to check the chat, because again this can become boring to watch. I just get lost in this process of sculpting. Alright, let's have a look at the entire character, how it's looking. We can go with the move brush as well, and then just push things so that there's no intersection. If you have the move brush with the AccuCurve enabled, which for you guys should be here under in the brush palette on the curve, you can get very sharp points. So these are the ones that I will use to exaggerate these folds or these points in here. And I think it's looking alright. Maybe in this area I didn't spend too much time at the back, so let's just do dumps on the brush. So in all the tension points, just another thing to keep in mind, or another tip is, in all the tension points, there's not going to be a great deal of wrinkles. So because of this arm, the tension point, the whole forearm is going to be a tension point where the fold is, sorry, the clothes is sort of like folding or wrapping around it. There's not going to be a lot of folds around there, except memory folds, or depending on the material that you are trying to recreate, then there's going to be more resistance and more structure. So if you're doing something like silk, you'll probably have way more wrinkles than this. But again, I'm trying to do kind of like a leathery material. In fact, we can just do something more like a memory fold here. Let's see if that looks good from this angle. Too much. And let's take the move brush and let's just exaggerate this point here. Always try to keep kind of like straight lines for the curves. So this one right here for the folds. So this one right here is kind of like a bit unnatural. So just, if you're gonna make a fold, make sure that it's intentional, and that way you can make, fine tune it so that it is helping the overall design, not just for the sake of trying to make it look like it's a piece of clothes. So you see this one is pretty strong here, so maybe smooth it a little bit. I exaggerated too much. And go with the clay brush and just fill in those those areas a little bit. And there we go. Another thing you can do with this type of the type of material is using the H polish, just to polish. Maybe let's go ahead and just subdivide this one more time, and then you can just use the H polish to make sure you have like straight lines as well as this smooth stronger. And that really helps to sharpen those details and simplify the shapes. Maybe here is probably going to be very obvious, the use of this H polish. This is something that I would use after I use, I mean the H polish is something that I would use after I do a pass with the damp standard and the standard brush as well, just to add more volume. But I think it's looking alright. Cool, let's see how everything is looking all together. Alright, and it's going to look a little bit more interesting when we cut it into pieces and refine the folds and do more wrinkles. Alright, let me see the chat. How far in depth are you taking this model? Are you going to unwrap it in here in ZBrush? I don't think so. I think this is going to be kind of like a concept sculpture. Maybe I'll do it afterwards. But I think what I wanted to do with these streams was to get this character to this pose stage and work on the different assets really, and just show you different techniques more than creating a full-on project character, which we're doing. But I just wanted to apply a bunch of different techniques, like I show you with the mask, with the horns, with the clothes, just so you have a good range of things that you can apply to another project. I don't know if I'm gonna, do all the UVs and stuff. What's the difference between the clay brush and the standard brush? They look very similar. No, they're actually very different. The standard brush builds volumes quite rapidly, whereas the clay brush it's more gradual and it just has an alpha, so that it behaves more like clay, like adding pieces of clay on top of it. So it allows you to control the volume a little bit more, whereas the standard brush it will add volume over itself, if that makes any sense. So let me just quickly show you. So the standard brush is great for this type of thing, right? Just to add more volume to the lines. But if I want to refine this and do something like that, right? And then go again with the same standard brush, the standard brush is going to add more volume on top of this area. So it's going to create this very blobby area, which is great in some cases, like in this example, to add volume to the folds and the wrinkles and the big folds, right? So that's great for that. But the clay brush, if you do a pass like this, right, and then go on top of it, let's say here on the side, it's just gonna average this a little bit, and it's not gonna be as strong, and then you can just simply smooth that out. And I found it to be more useful for sculpting. You have more control over the shapes, and you avoid this kind of like blobby look if you just use this standard brush. All right, excellent. So let's go ahead and keep working on this guy. So I'm going to show you, just for the sake of finishing this part here at the back really quickly. Let's do a quick save as well. I'm going to show you some of the brushes that I developed for the close and drapery course. Where are we? I think here. There we go. So this, there is a couple ones that are really cool. So the Magic Fold Hard, it's a brush based on a VDM, and it just gives you, you know, these very sharp lines. And because it's using a bunch of, you know, settings to refine it, you don't have to do much work other than just select this, and you'll see it just creates that fold immediately like that. So I can just do this, and I can even go over the same area multiple times and then just to smooth it out and very quickly create this. I would use this to just add more folds in an area that is not as visible. We'll probably have, I mean, this is not ideal for this type of clothes, so let's just do. It also has to do with the direction. So if you do it from the other side, you'll see it just carves in, and the soft part is at the top. So but you can see it's kind of like saving you a few steps just using this brush and the standard one. And because it has two kind of like directions, then you can go, for example, this one, if I want to refine this, I can go from the point of tension in this fashion, right? And then from the other side, I refine this bit and then just use the soft, any smooth brush to refine it. But that is also why you can just go very loosely and do this type of thing and just create the, oops, the other way around, right? And create these folds. Again, these folds are maybe too strong for the type of material that I'm going for, but hopefully you get the idea. Let's just to show you. I mean, this is not going to be visible from the render, but just wanted to show you something else. There is another one that it's a little bit softer. It's the same idea, but it just makes softer lines. So you'll see it's not as sharp. And I'm going to a little bit crazy with the type of folds in this area, but let's just leave it there. I don't want to overdo it. I mean, I did too many here. For again, the type of material is this leathery material that I'm trying to go for. Might not have as many. It has more structure than what these folds are making it to be. So I can just use the H polish to polish this a bit. And use the clay brush to add some volume. I mean, if I can give you like the best tip I can give you, aside from from establishing the tension points with creating folds, is to always think about the material. Depending on the properties of the material that you want to recreate, the whole system of folds is going to be completely different. Just because, again, there is more resistant, or hang on a second, dumpster the brush. Yeah, it's going to be more resistant to the changes in direction. It's going to hold the structure a little bit better or not, depending if it's cotton, silk. That's going to make a huge impact. Alright, so I'm just going to leave this one here, and let's move on so that I can show you more stuff that probably makes it more interesting, because we haven't done the fiber mesh and stuff like that. So I'm going to leave this one as it is. The thickness is just a matter of doing panel loops, and we do the thickness like that. The split of this one as well, we can, you know, free subdivision level and, you know, duplicate this a few times, free subdivision level, and then just cut it into pieces. And yeah, and have, you know, we'll try to do that if we have time later on, but those are more standard ways to work and standard techniques. So I'll just try to focus on the probably on the things that you won't find as easy somewhere else, or just test new things really. Is this brush free? I mean, it's free if you get the course. They're just brushes for the course. I'll just show you a couple more. So there's this X folds. So this brush is pretty cool for working on these type of areas, on the compression folds. And I can just do this type of thing maybe on the other side, right? And then just smooth that out, and you'll have compression folds almost immediately. But is the way that I like to create brushes is so that they work as a sculpting brush and not just an alpha. Because you can take a fold and create an alpha, and you can click and drag, and then you'll get that fold, and that's great. But it doesn't allow you to customize it, or it doesn't allow you to have control over how that shape would look like. Whereas if you use a sculpting brush and you turn it into this type of, folds stuff, it's still using an alpha, but you have more control over where to. I mean, if you press hard, you get a sharper line. If you go softer, it gives you a different effect. I mean, this one is not great for the type of material we work in here. Probably in this area would have been great to just create these compression folds, but again, it's another brush that is explained in the course. There's also a controlled gravity one. This one is kind of like a standard brush, but it adds a bunch of gravity. So it's super controlled for folds like that, and it creates that gravity effect straight away. So this one is the one that I would use instead of the standard brush to refine these shapes, just because, again, depending on the material and the weight of the material as well, you might have more influence. Like the weight will influence the gravity. Well, not the gravity, but it will influence the shape a bit more. So those are brushes that I made for the course. So obviously, if you get the course, that you can get them in there. Just wanted to show you. It's not that you cannot make what I'm doing with the standard brush. Those brushes are kind of like shortcuts to help you improve or refine the workflow. But you could do the same thing with the standard brush and normal alphas. Up to you. No, the Comic Legend. So those brushes that I just showed you as from the course that I'm referring to, that I go a little bit more in depth on how to build this type of clothes. Whoops, just dropped my bottle on top of my Cintiq. All right. Okay, so which course you're talking about? I'll put a link to it in at the end if you want. You go to the ZBrush guides and just type in Google clothes and drapery course, or Odd Spirits of Set. You will find it in there. I'll share the link afterwards. I just want to go ahead and move on and do the rest. Cool. So let's see what we have. I don't have the sketch. All right. So the next thing would be to do the forecode, just because that one has an interesting technique that I can show you. So using this mesh, now that we have created it, we can reuse it for a bunch of stuff. So I'm gonna go into solo mode. Actually, you know what? Instead of duplicating, I'm just gonna do it over this one. So let's do a quick save just in case. And I'm gonna go ahead and select the mask pen, hold Control, and I'm just gonna mask the areas that I want to create for the third coat, or whatever this additional piece of clothes is going to be. So that one is going to be pretty big, like a pretty prominent piece of clothes. Something like that, and obviously you can just connect it here around. So the one that I'm going to do is going to be the most prominent one, and because it's going to have probably Nanomesh or fiber mesh, we'll see what works better. It's going to be very, very detailed. So the one that we just created with the leathery material, you won't see much of it. we'll see how we go. I mean, at this point, I'm using the sketch that I showed you guys as a reference, but I kind of like keep designing as I progress. So my designs, if I do it straight in 3D, they evolve over time. Just figuring out what would work best in 3D. Alright, so something like that should be fine. In fact, maybe we can reduce the amount of geometry generated here at the back, and that will save us some polygons when we do the fiber mesh and the rest. Alright, let's go ahead and do a bit more here, and let's clean this up. Cool. So one thing we can do is hold Control and Alt and click on the mask, and that sharpens everything. And that's for the next step. Hey Natsumi, good to have you here. Give me 1 second. So it's called So if you just type in Google clothes and drapery course, you'll get to this page in the ZBrush guides, or you can just, it's this one, clothes and drapery course, and this is the one that I was talking about. So we create the character is just is something that I would give you as a base, and then the course is all about creating all these type of clothes in ZBrush. So nothing else but sculpting in ZBrush. No Marvelous Designer, nothing like that. It's just 25, 20 odd, 26 videos covering the entire process. And here's the full outline if you want to see what we cover in the course, and the different brushes that I just showed you. Some of them, they're here as well. Anyway, it's in there if you wanna check it out. I don't know if I can put it here in the chat. I'll just try. Cool. Alrighty, so let's go ahead and extract this. So I'm gonna also make sure that this is set to 0, so I don't want any thickness. Click extract and accept. Perfect, clear the mask. So now we have this piece of geometry that is sitting there. What I'll do is probably scale this up a little bit, so inflate, just so that we can see it a little bit better, just a tiny bit more. Again, this is going to change because obviously the material is different and we haven't done zero measure. Let's turn double as well so we can see behind it. Cool. So one thing I want to do is with the move brush and a large brush size is make sure the perspective, let's leave perspective off. I'm gonna just drop this a bit more. Right, something like that. Again, don't worry about how this is looking. Definitely, it's gonna look a little bit better when we do the zero measure, and we will have more control over it. But just as a quick cleanup of the shapes. Oops. Alright, so this one is going to have definitely more structure than the one underneath. So you can think about it as kind of like the skin of a weird animal with fur. So you have these little areas with, they're not going to conform to the shape. They'll be stronger. And again, that just has to do with the structure of the material. So you create these little bits of geometry sticking out. We can exaggerate it a bit more. into solo mode. All right. So cool. So now that we have that, we can go ahead and do a ZBrush and just fix this up. Let's go to the ZBrush here. And this time I don't want to keep any of the polygroups. I'm not interested in those. Those are for the other piece of code. So let's just do a ZBrush without the legacy, and with half, just as it is, without tweaking any. To be honest, I rarely tweak the settings of the ZBrush unless I'm doing something very specific. So for hard surface modeling or something else, that's when I'm just gonna get a little bit more into tweaking all these settings. But the default ones are pretty decent. Now you see, ZBrush try to create like a change of pattern here, change of flow. I'm not interested in that because, to be honest, this is not going to be very visible because we're going to have the fur on top. So one thing we can do is simplify this, make sure that we have the smooth stronger. I'm just going to simplify this. Actually, before I do that, let me undo that and just undo the ZBrush. I'm just going to do it from this point. Cool. I'm also going to create a single polygroup. So remember, we have multiple. Control W to select a single polygroup. There we go. And I'm going to polish by groups so that we have cleaner edges all around. All right. Let's just smooth it a little bit more. And that, in theory, is going to help the ZBrush do a better job, just keeping things a little bit cleaner. Right, so these wobbly angle lines here, you can actually fix them up or smooth them out using. So in the brush palette, there is in the modifiers area, you'll see we have this smooth slider. Right now I have the move brush selected, so it's just at 0. But if I press Shift, you'll see how this changes. Not this one, sorry. What am I? Smooth brush modifier, sorry. You'll see it's at 3. So I can just go ahead and change this to 1, and that way ZBrush changes the amount of connected points. Not changes the amount of connected points, sorry. By default, ZBrush, the smooth brush is just smoothing areas or points, polygons, points, sorry, that are connected to more than 3 points, and that's why it is not a problem all around. But when you get to the borders, there is less points, obviously, as in each point of the border is not connected to as many polygons or as many points inside. So by changing that number, it allows you to soften just the borders a little bit more. So that's something I want to do here. We'll fix the shape of it a bit more when we finish with the ZBrush, but just want to smooth this out a little bit. Whoops. Alright, so let's just put the smooth brush back to where it was. So minimum of connected points set it to 3. And that way we can just use it as normal. Cool. So hopefully that helps. Cool. Let's go ahead and do a ZBrush. I'm going to use the normal settings, and then I'm going to try the legacy version and see if it does anything. All right, so I just created a kind of like a weird set of connection here. The other part or the other side is pretty clean. I'm going to try legacy, see what that gives us, and I'm going to try to keep reducing the polygon count. So see, the legacy just gives me straight lines. It's just I think the new algorithm is trying too hard to maintain the shape, which is great, but in this case all I want to do is clean everything up so that we have a good starting point. So I'm going to use the legacy again, ZBrush. I'm going to do it again, just keep reducing this. There we go. So this is a pretty decent topology. We can go ahead and refine these bits a little bit. But yeah, I think that's about it. That's what I wanted. That's what I wanted to get out of this process of ZRemeshing. Perfect. So this is a good base. Let's go ahead and get out of solo mode, and here's where we can start refining the volume so that there's no intersection, just using the move brush. And just try to make sense of how this piece of clothes will react with, or how it will interact with other pieces of clothes. Again, just trying to stay true to the idea of that, you know, there's gravity, and all of these pieces have weight, so the gravity is pushing them, pulling them down, and that's going to maintain that illusion, or the illusion of realism, really. So all I'm doing here is just moving things around with the move brush, nothing too fancy here. Alright, so that's looking good. Let's go ahead and do a quick save. Let's see if you guys have any questions in the chat. What's the difference between ZRemesher and Dynamesh and changing the polygon count? Quite a bit. So ZRemesher allows you to keep like clean topology and a good flow of the topology. Dynamesh is more something that we use during the sketching or the initial stages of the character, where you're just sketching things and you can have more freedom and don't worry about the topology or the polygon count. But when you're starting to do this in this stage, when you're trying to keep everything clean from the beginning, it's better to use ZRemesher to maintain the polygon count on the control and so especially the flow. If I were to Dynamesh this, just Dynamesh is gonna fill everything, so we're not gonna have any. I mean, with Dynamesh we're just gonna have a block of geometry, and it's just gonna be a good sketching piece of geometry that you can sketch on. But the ZRemesher is probably what we want in this stage. I mean, it's not the best explanation between the difference between one and the other. You can use ZRemesher from the beginning as a sketching tool. So every time that you do something and move things along the way, you can keep ZRemeshing, and then you can create a sketch that it also has a very clean topology. So if you want to have a look at someone that does an amazing job with the ZRemesher, you can check Shane Olson. So he's the master of like ZRemeshing, and he uses it in a kind of like a sketching tool as well, so to keep everything clean, or Polygon as well in ZBrush Live. I like to use a bunch of techniques, whatever works for me really. I don't like to stick to one thing. But if you want to see a great use of it, definitely check those guys out. Please teach the luxury stuff like this, the luxury stuff. Yeah, so anyway, I don't know if that's a luxury stuff, but cool. Now that we have these, we can go ahead and do the really fun part, which is figuring out how to do the third, whether it's fiber mesh or whether it's another technique which we can use, which is using the Nanomesh. So let me see, because we have about 3 more minutes in the stream. I'm gonna ask Kyle. One second. Just want to make sure that there's nobody after me. I think the next person is I think Oscar. But Oscar is at 7, I think. So I might be able to go a bit over time. All right. I'm just gonna keep going, and if Kyle tell me off, then I'll switch it off. But I think I can go over a little bit. There's about 3 hours of difference, so it's plenty. All right. So the first thing I want to show you is how to reuse the settings and the fiber mesh settings that we created in the previous stream, right? So I'm gonna go into solo mode, probably just turn off polyframe. And if you remember, one of the things that we talked about when creating fiber mesh is the fact that if you have double enable, it's just going to create fibers along both sides of the normal. So I'm just going to turn it off so you don't see the inside. That's going to also help with the polygon count in terms of fibers or the point counts. And I'm going to click preview, and boom, we have great looking fibers. I'm just going to go ahead and load. So I'm going to click on open. I'm going to click on open here, and I'm going to find the fiber mesh presets that we create last stream. So today is the 14th, it was on the 7th. Yep, cool. So I'm going to load that one, and you'll see we have the settings that we created in the previous stream, which is, you know, pretty cool. Let's go ahead and click solo. Obviously, they're too long, so it is we saved the preset, and that's a good starting point, but we can just fine tune it. I actually don't mind these big ones around here. So here's another trick. So if I go into solo mode and turn this off, right? Well, it's not a trick, it's just the way that the fiber mesh work a little bit. You'll see that the polygons here at the top are, you know, slightly larger and bigger than the ones here at the bottom. At least 3 times bigger than what is here at the bottom. So if I turn this, don't know what happened there. Yeah, so you'll see that those polygons that are bigger are creating larger and bigger fibers, whereas the smaller ones are making smaller, like 3 times smaller probably fibers. So this is actually really cool because you can graduate the size of the brush of the fibers based on the underlying geometry and the size of the polygons. So if you want to change that, you can just play with the by area. So if I set this to 0, you see everything is kind of like more unified, like the size are more consistent. If I set this to 1, it's really gonna push it. So obviously the larger polygons are gonna be huge, and very tiny bit here at the bottom. Not only the size, but also the amount of fibers that are being created. So 0.5 is a pretty good compromise, and I actually don't mind these huge pieces of, you know, I think it looks cool. You might disagree with me, but again, we can tweak this a little bit more. All right, so let's change the length so that it's not so big. Cool, so that's looking good. Let's play with the gravity from this angle just to see it a little bit better. So gravity profile is at 0.3, which makes it more puffy. We can increase that a bit more. There we go. So that they feel that have more weight. So if I push it all the way down, it creates this effect. But I'm not going for this. I just want to keep it more random, as in attribute less weight to the actual fiber, so that they're not affected by gravity as much. All right, so that's pretty good. We can actually reduce the by area a little bit, so we have more consistent length as well. So that's not too bad. I think it's looking good. One thing we can do as well is increase the number of fibers. So for right now it's at 4. Let's set it to 8, double. Remember that this number is in the thousands, so I have 8,000 fibers. But that's, you know, that's pretty cool. So these areas are a little bit messy in terms, I mean, in the way that they look, and I like them this way. But then we can do a little bit of grooming and just pushing things a bit so that there's no intersection here. But this is a good general look of what I want. Fortunately, when we create the fibers, so if I create accept, let's say that I'm happy with this, which I'm kind of happy with. Actually, before I do that, one more thing. I just noticed that the fibers may be too long in here, so we can just reduce the length of this a tiny bit more. just pushing it with the move brush. All right, and let's do it again. There we go. So that's more like it. I mean, we can keep changing the length depending on what you want to create. I think that this looks good, but I just want something very stylized and very exaggerated. Like everything is over the top with this guy. Cool. I think I had it at 340. Let's go for 320. Cool. Alright, you can also increase the variation in the length. So if I push this, right now it's at 0.44. If I push it all the way up, it's just gonna create more randomness, which is not too bad. This is the type of stages of the process that I spend quite a bit of time making sure that is the right look. So I test a few things. I do have a vision of where I want to go, and I have an idea of what processes to use. But at the end of the day, if it doesn't look good because it doesn't match the idea that I have in my head, I spend a lot of time in here trying to find the right one, or something that looks a little bit better. So I think it was in 0.44. Let's set it to 0.7. So quite a bit more of variation in terms of the length. Alright, great. So I think it's good. There's just a few fibers going through the head, but that's something we'll fix with the grooming. So I'm happy with this. The amount of fibers I think is not too much. We have 8 segments, so that's gonna make it quite heavy. So just pay attention. Right now, this active point is the amount of points in my actual underline mesh. When I create this, ZBrush is going to create a new subtool. So let's just do that. I'm going to click accept. Do I want to enable fast preview? I'm going to say no for the time being. And I have a new, let's do quick save. Cool. So I have this one, and it has 288,000 polygons. So it's not too bad. It will render perfectly fine in Keyshot, and even in Marmoset as well if I want to do it that way. Cool. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead, make sure that we have, it should be selected by default, but still check. I'm going to select this one as well and just clear the mask before I forget. And here is the fibers. So we have just the fibers. Cool. Now I'm going to go to groom hair toss, right? And with a large brush, this is the one that allows us to tweak this a little bit. Right now the effect of this brush is really strong, so we're losing all that curliness, right? But this is kind of like what I want to fix these points. So I'm not using a lot of pressure, and I'm just nudging things around, because all I want to do here is just make sure there's no intersection of looks like a pimp. Great. So that's the look that I'm going for, the pimp creature. One thing that is a bit annoying that you have to be careful is that the fibers will conform as well to anything that is visible or any visible geometry. So if I leave the head or the body on while I'm doing these type of things, then try to maintain that or conform the fibers to that shape of the head. So I need to make sure I don't do that. So you'll see very quickly, just grabbing some points here with this brush, I'm just pushing things away from the head, and that is really all I'm trying to do here. Sometimes it's really hard to pick the right one or the right strand of hair or fiber. So one thing you can do is go to the preferences, go to magnifying glass, turn that on, and it's gonna increase the radius, increase the zoom a little bit, remove the fade, and remove curvature. So this is kind of like a zooming thing, right? So I'm just gonna try to find something like this one, and then you will be able to, once you click, you'll be able to grab the right point. So there's one here, this one. There we go. And Shift M is the shortcut for the magnifying glass. All right, so I think that looks a little bit better. There's still something going on here. Just push it down. So this is a process that is quite manual, and it could take a bit of time, especially if you don't want to destroy the curliness. Something else we can do, and this is probably the first step I would do with the fibers, is using the move brush. So the move brush is great. You can just click and affect the fibers in the same way that you will affect any geometry, because at the end of the day the fibers are just polygons, or are just geometry that's been optimized to look like fibers, but it is geometry. So one thing I like to do so that I don't completely destroy my fibers with the move brush is going to the brush subpalette, or the brush palette, and under the brush subpalette there is a fiber mesh subpalette. So I'm going to keep this preserve length to 100, and that way, no matter how hard I push it, it's not going to change the length of these fibers, right? So this is the one that I can use towards the end, just to change the curliness, because I mean, maybe these pieces of hair, when they get closer to these areas where there's not a lot of clumps, they're not as curly. And that also is going to help create a bit of contrast between these areas and the longer ones that are less curly, with the ones that are a bit more, more fun, like these ones here at the bottom. Alright, so with this one as well, we can just keep refining some of these shapes here. But the good thing about the move brush is that we're not, I mean, I'm not afraid of pushing it too much, because it's going to preserve that length. So it's not moving things like a normal polygon anymore. It's just preserving that length. Cool. Alright, so I feel like maybe we could, with a larger brush size, we can just push some of these fibers in, so that it covers kind of like this line of the underlying geometry a little bit better. It feels more natural as well. So all I'm doing here is very, very simple and very minor tweaks to the fibers using the smooth brush. The move brush. You can also use the smooth brush. The problem with the smooth brush is that it's going to flatten, or it's going to flatten the fibers. But in some points is good. So in these areas it doesn't matter, just so that they don't touch the ground. And then using the move brush to fine tune it a bit. So cool. So this is looking interesting. There's some fibers still going through here, but we can again use the move brush to get them out of the way. Oh, all right. Let's do a quick save. What about the character's beard? So the one, yep. So that's the next step. I just wanted to get this one out of the way, and then we'll do that in a second. I think, can you guys please check? Some of you guys might know who's next in the stream. I'm pretty sure that we have plenty of time in between. I don't wanna eat up anybody's time. But I reckon I can do maybe a few more minutes, maybe half an hour more, whatever it takes to do the beard and show you the other technique with the Nanomesh. Alright, so this is I think this is looking good. I'm happy with how this is going. So obviously you see that this makes it very, very detailed, and it creates a nice contrast. So the other piece of clothes that we did before with all the folds is probably gonna have less amount of details. So I'm not gonna do it as I'm not gonna add as many details to that one just because I want to keep the contrast in that sense. Let's go ahead and do the beard for the character, which is gonna be slightly different, but similar to this fiber mesh. And then I'm gonna show you a different technique for this fur coat, and then we can choose which one looks better. So the beard for the character is actually really simple. I'm gonna select this piece of geometry that we created last time, right? So just a piece of geometry following the head. And what we can do is select certain polygroups. So we also assign different polygroups so that we can manipulate the beard if we wanted to a little bit more. So I'm gonna hide these polygroups. So Control Shift click and select those, and this one as well. Oops. And this one, and this one. All right. So I'm gonna invert that, mask everything. So now we have, hang on, invert the mask. Whoops, what did I do? I'm gonna assign a single polygroup. No, I already lost track of what I was doing. All right, so I'm gonna hide this polygroup, mask it, invert the selection, and invert the masking. Ah, I see. Yeah, we don't have enough geometry to do it. Doesn't matter. We'll do it like that. Cool. So all I did was just to mask this set of polygroups, but it's also masking like a tiny little set of polygroup around. It doesn't really matter. Let's go ahead and get out of solo mode so that we can see it in real time, and let's go to fiber mesh and turn it on. And you see, because we loaded previously the set of fiber mesh, this is what we end up with. Now this is very close to the fur coat now, so we can just try to tweak it a little bit. Let's go ahead and go into solo mode. I'm gonna reduce the effect of the gravity, so it's gonna be more puffy, like so. 4000 fiber mesh, that's fine. I mean, all of these settings are the ones that we actually create for the beard, so I'm not gonna play around much with them. I think they're looking okay. And maybe the difference between the beard and the fur coat is not only the size, but also we can play with the colors later on. Perfect. So I'm just gonna click accept. Would you activate fast preview? So I'm gonna say no, and you'll see, because we generated those fibers from the polygroups, we have different polygroups, and that's just gonna be great if you wanna, groom these as well. But I think this is working quite nicely as it is. We just need to fine-tune the position of it so there is no intersection. So just quick nudges here with the move brush. All right. Let's have a look. All right, so that's looking quite interesting and detailed, and that's kind of what I wanted to go for. Now, this area of the beard might be a little bit short, so if you want to increase the length of it, we can use the groom lengthen, and that's probably going to change the curliness. So let's just have a look. Not too bad. So it's kind of like a move brush, really strong move brush that extends the length of it. Right. So I think this is working well. It's making some of these areas a little bit too straight. But again, that's not a big deal. We can go back with the move brush. Let's just push this up a bit. so that again they're getting influenced by the third coat as well. Oops. All right. So I think this is working. Let's go ahead and do. I want to make this a little bit more messy here, so we can use the turbulence, groom turbulence, and then just add a tiny bit of turbulence here so that they don't look as straight. And this is just going to help with the look. Just a tiny bit. I don't want to go overboard with this. Perfect. Another thing we can do is let's go to the subtool, select the gizmo. Let's do quick save just in case. And I'm going to center the gizmo to that beard, and I just want to push it back a bit. The entire subtool. Alright, I think I'm gonna leave it here and just show you the other technique, because this is just a matter of I don't know, fine-tuning the shape. It's almost like sculpting, and just fine-tuning these areas. Okay, yeah, so I think I'm gonna leave it there and show you the other alternative for the third coat. I'm quite happy with how this is looking, and it's gonna make more sense once I, start playing with the colors for the beard of the character and the third coat, and split these ones. But again, those are kind of like repetitive actions, nothing too complicated here. So let's go ahead and do two more things. Let's do the additional set of, I don't know what they are, just a couple of extra pieces like a scarf or something, and I'm going to show you the technique of using Nanomesh instead of fiber mesh, so you can choose between which one you want to use later on if you're following along. And that's just going to be a different technique, so let's do that really quickly. Go in here, go into solo mode, select that one, and I'm going to do a similar process to what I did with the third coat. I'm just going to mask certain regions like so, right? And I think here at the back as well, maybe we can invert the mask and then just mask this out even a little bit more. All right, and maybe select the mask lasso, invert the mask, the mask pen, and then just close this one here. Let's see, it's being covered a little bit. You know what, let's keep it simple. I'm just gonna do a line here, right? So this is gonna be visible here, and then we can do another one around there. Right, so ideally, this will give the impression that it's kind of like a scarf around the neck, but we don't need to do that. Everything else is covering it. So let's go ahead for that. Go for that. Invert the mask here. Just gonna make sure that everything is clean and just the masked areas are showing. Cool. So let's do the same thing. Make sure that thickness is at 0. Extract, accept, clear the mask, and I'm gonna clear the mask in this one as well. So we now have these two pieces of geometry. Excellent. So we can assign a single polygroup, or actually auto group, so that we have two different groups. And using the same technique, just the move brush, I'm just going to push this down. And this one as well. And making sure that they're not intersecting the other geometry. Cool. Let's now I'm going to use the smooth brush. So this is exactly the same process as the third coat or whatever that is. All right. Also, let's go to the smooth brush. I also have it here, so I'm gonna change the connection points for the smooth brush and just clean these borders, just to make it a little bit thinner as well. So all this part of this stage is just refining that initial or base mesh, and then once we have that covered, we can do the same process, which was created a cleaner topology with the ZBrush. So again, I'm gonna tick half, click on legacy, remesh, and let's go ahead and use the acute curve of the move brush to just make this a little bit more pointy, just to indicate or tell ZBrush that we want to keep this as a rather sharp edges. Do that again, ZBrush. So you'll see, just try to keep these points. So that's great. Let's do that again, and again, and again. So that is kind of what I need. Maybe another one, even. Great. So yeah, I think this one is gonna work really nice. And I like the fact that this one has only like a 2 edge loops or poly loops, and this one has 3, and that is gonna create a slightly different look for what we're going to do. Great. So let's get out of solo mode. We can tweak the position of this. I mean, what's great about the technique that I'm going to show you with the with Nanomesh is that you don't have to do this step that I'm doing of tweaking everything before you create it, because once you create the Nanomesh, those are just particles or like instances created on top of these polygons. So you will be able to tweak the underlying geometry, and everything is going to move with it. So that's really, really cool. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to do a quick save. I think we're doing good progress in the last 20 minutes of this stream. I don't know if you guys have any questions so far about the process. I'll see if I have time as well to answer them. Let me check the chat. What about the characters beer? No, cool. So no questions so far. Great. I'm going to go into solo, and this is where we're going to start having some fun with the Nanomesh. So before we create anything, before we do anything with these, we need to create the Nanomesh brush or whatever we're going to insert. By default, you can use any insert brush and turn any insert brush into a Nanomesh brush, but I tend to create my own as well, and there's no brush that could give me the effect of what I want, which is kind of like an interlink set of, like a pattern of, how would you call that? Like a very badly sewed together pieces of. Let me just show you what I'm because this is very hard to explain. The idea that I'm going for. It's just gonna make sense when I show you. So I'm gonna start with maybe with a cylinder, maybe with a sphere. What would be the best way? I'm gonna start with a cylinder. All right, I'm gonna make it a Polymesh 3D. So this is a different tool. I'm gonna rotate it around. Holding Shift. All right, and scale it in the X-axis, something like that. All right, and I'm gonna do Dynamesh. Ooh, this is gonna be maybe this is too big. All right, so I'm just gonna scale this down, run it again. So we have less geometry. So that's probably what I want. Cool. Then I can start using the gizmo as well as the deformers. So I'm going to select the arc, the bend arc, and that's going to give me a very simple way to control the curvature of these polygons. So I just want to do something like that, not too much, and the white cone is going to change the length of it. Oh, sorry, the radius of that curvature. Right, so I think something like that is fine. Actually, let's just reduce it a little bit, and I'm going to show you a different deformer. I'm going to click accept. So this is just giving us this bend curve. There's another one called slice, multi-slice. Let's see which one is better for this. Well, the extender. The extender is going to be a good one. So I just want to create a more like a flatter version here from this point. So what the extender does is you can just pull from these yellow cones, orange cones from any point, and this little blue point you can also move it around, and from this point you can extend your mesh. So I want to have like a more like a flatter version of this, or a flatter shape here. So I can just leave the point where it is, take this cone and just push it. So you'll see how it is extending. It's keeping these two shapes that we created with the bend curve, but it's increasing the distance between these. Okay, so something like that. And the idea is that this is going to be a single thread, quite big and blobby thread, that we can use as a nanomesh to populate the entire pieces of geometry that we created just before. So let's click on accept. Cool. Control click and drag to redynamesh. We can assign a single polygroup. So this is looking alright. Okay, and let's go ahead and tweak it a little bit so that it's not perfect. So in other words, there is no like tension and stuff. We can make it a bit, make it a little bit weird. So let's select the gizmo, and I'm going to use the bend curve. And this one is great because you can create these points. So right now it has only 2 points, which you can click and move around. I'm going to undo that. But if we enable this, the amount of resolution of the curve resolution, we can just add more points, right? And that's great because you can just do this type of thing, just push things around. I just want to make it a little bit more like add imperfections to this, same as doing this type of stuff. So I'm going to try to keep this area down, like so. Hopefully, I mean, this probably doesn't make much sense right now, the type of shape that I'm going for, but just think it as a little thread that is going to be visible from this angle, and the depth of this is just where it's going to be embedded. It's going to make sense in just a second. I just want to create a simple piece like this one, that then we can go ahead and simplify even further with the I mean, if you have something very detailed and you actually sculpt things in here, you can use the decimation master to create something, a low poly version of this that keeps the shapes. But because this is such a simple piece of geometry, it doesn't have too many things that are complicated. We can just do a ZBrush and just keep reducing the size of this. In fact, we can actually work with open geometry, and that is going to be easier. So I'm going to use the slice curve here, hold Control and Shift to slice this up, maybe like this. With a spacebar you can move the curve. So that one is fine. Hold the spacebar, you can reposition this. Okay, and now we can use this select rectangular, select this and delete hidden. Cool. So now this is open geometry, and we can do a ZBrush with the legacy one enable and half. Let's do that. So the ZBrush is going to reduce the polygon count and keep this blobbiness. So in this case, I think the legacy didn't do a great job. So I'm going to try the new ZBrush. There we go. So that's pretty good. So in this case, this is where I can just play around with this too and see what gives me a better result. I want to keep reducing this quite a bit. And if you want, you can also do it manually. So with the sim modeler, you can hover over the edge, right click, and go to delete edge loop complete, and then just select a few lines to reduce the polygon count. Alright, something like that. I think that looks alright. We can also change some of these ones here. So I'm going to delete that one. So it's a combination of the sim modeler and the ZBrush. So the series measure is good to give us some good starting point, and then we can simply use the series measure to fine tune it. I'm gonna slide this one. Oops. Slide the edge loop complete, just to fine tune the shape a tiny bit. And this is sliding along the geometry, so pretty good. Cool. So again, all that complicated process to create this little tube, which you can also do with the curve tube brush. That's another way to do it. But anyway, I just wanted to show you the deformers and all the stuff. Cool. So let's go ahead and click. Actually, let's create the nano brush. So in order to create a nano brush, you need to have an insert brush. So first create an insert brush, and this is important. This is an important step because the way that you create, from the angle that you create the insert brush. I'm explaining this in the wrong way. Basically, if you create an insert brush, right, it's based on the camera angle. So when you drag it, right, it's gonna be from this angle. So if right now this is an insert brush, I can just click and drag, and you see it's being dragged in that way. If I create, let's say if I create an insert brush from this angle, when I insert it, it's just going to be like that, which is not ideal. So this is why I said this is the important step, just to make sure you have the angle or the camera angle that you want to insert from. So when you drag it, it's going to look like this from this point. Once you have the insert brush, we can go to create Nanomesh brush. There we go. So this is a Nanomesh brush. And we can go to our character. Alright, and we have these pieces here. Now I'm going to create two sets of Nanomesh. Or actually, let's just create. Let's see what looks better. I'm going to right click on a face, and I'm going to make sure I select all polygons. Right. So right now the action, the C-modeler action is set to Nanomesh, which is the default if you create a Nanomesh brush. And then the target is all polygons, so it's going to apply the Nanomesh to everything, right? It doesn't matter if we have, polygroups or not. It's just going to, every single polygon is going to have a Nanomesh. And let's go ahead and expand the Nanomesh sub tab here. So right now everything is grayed out because we don't have Nanomesh. But let's go ahead and click and drag to assign or to add these pieces. All right. So that's all right. That's looking good. But obviously we have to, we can tweak this quite a bit. Now the first thing I want to try to fix from the Nanomesh palette is how, how the direction of these little tubes are, how they're being placed, because you have horizontal ones, you have vertical ones. So the alignment, in reality, that's what I want. So here at the bottom we have a sub tab or sub palette called alignment. So probably normal is not going to be the, let's just go for normal first. Alright, so normal is probably the one that I want really, but you can play around with different alignments. The near align to near edge is actually not too bad. You'll see it's slightly different than normal, especially here at the top. Look at this, between normal, it's kind of like everything is flat, whereas near edge gives you this better result in this specific case. So this one might be an interesting one, just align to random edge. Just to create a more interesting pattern. So this might be a good one. We can try that. The random one. So let's start with, which one is the one that I said? Long edge, near edge. This one, near edge. Cool. So the alignment is fine. This is what I wanted. And now we can start playing with some randomness. So I'm gonna scale this down so that it doesn't go overboard. Although I wouldn't mind just having a tiny bit more of these sticks sticking out. And let's go ahead and play with the width and the length and the height. So the height, I don't want to change it too much. The height is just how much is embedded into this geometry. But the length actually could be improved, so we can have more thickness, and the width just a tiny bit more, like so. The size is going to change the overall size. It's like a proportional scaling. So I'm going to keep the length and the width with these numbers, but the size allows me to fine tune these later on. So let's just leave it around there. I'm going to add variation to the length, so it's going to change how thick this looks. You see, if I push it all the way up, these ones are quite thin and these ones are very thick, so not too much. I'm just going to add a tiny bit of variation to help with the randomness and the natural and organic feel to it. Cool. So what else we can do? We can rotate things a little bit. So right now the rotation in, I believe, would be in Z. Let's just check. Yeah. So the rotation in Z is the one that I wanna, in the Z axis is the one that I wanna tweak. So all we have to do is just add a tiny bit of rotation. 7 is fine, and then increase the randomness. So just with these two sliders, you'll get a more, a more random effect. We still have to tweak a few things, and once we create a random distribution, we might have to come back and tweak things, but let's just do that. Another thing is you can increase the tile pattern, but that's just gonna do it. So you can create like a stitching pattern very, very quickly with this, you'll see. So that is kind of like what I'm going for, but it has to be more more thought than just I have to put more thought into it than just using this tile. But if what I'm trying to do fails, we can revert to this, which looks pretty good. If you want these little pieces to actually fit the polygon, you just need to change from prop to fit, and that kind of fits. I mean, it's small, but it kind of fits the polygons, or fill. Right? So you have different options. So let's just go for what I'm trying to do originally. I'm gonna add randomness, and this is just gonna, right now each one of these pieces is, or each one of the polygons has a single piece, right? If I change to random distribution, it's just gonna be randomly placed wherever. So I'm just gonna do this, and I'm gonna increase this until I start to see that these pieces are covering the entire mesh. So something like that. If I do too much, then I'm going to start to lose that idea of like interlocking and badly sewing together pieces, which is what I'm trying to go for. So let's turn this off. Right, so this is not too bad, but like I said, we can go back and tweak things. So the size, I think the size is fine. We can just tweak the width, so reduce the width, but then we start to lose the effect of a long tube. So let's just leave this one as it is. Maybe reduce the size a tiny bit, or change this to feed. Fill is too much, it's just filling the entire polygon. I think prop is the best one in this case. Just reduce that a bit, increase the randomness. So I'm just playing with the size here and the randomness to get this type of thing. So I kind of like this interlocking pattern, but in order to make it more visible and more obvious, what we can do is play with the height. So if you remember, what I did at the beginning was just change the width and the length, but we haven't touched the height. So the height is the one that is going to push it away from the underlying mesh, right? So I can just take this height. See? Well, it's not really pushing it away, it's just increasing the height and the distance. I might not want to change that, actually. I want to leave it as it is, and instead what we can do is change the offset. So the offset in Z is the one that I was explaining, really, the one that pushes in or pushes us out. So I want to push it out a tiny bit, and then use lots of randomness and variation. Right, so especially here you can see a big change just using the offset, and this is exactly what I'm trying to achieve with this pattern. So it's gonna look very complicated, like very intricate, but this ultimately is just a very simple set of polygons and a bunch of little pieces that we can, or like let's call it particles, that we can just tweak, and we can in fact change the shape of it, and then it's just gonna be updated. And I'm gonna show you that. So I wanted to show you two more things with this specific technique, and that's why I wanted to show you this. But I think I'm happy with this. So we don't have to convert it or anything. This is gonna render just fine. Get out of solo mode, and we have a better idea of how this looks with the rest of the model. So now that I see this in comparison with the rest, I think they look a little bit tiny, a bit small. So we can increase maybe the length and the width as well, and maybe reduce the size, and then we can reduce the distribution. Alright, it's just playing around with the same sliders, but a little bit more in context with the rest of the character. Alright. So I think this works. I'm gonna go to the move brush now. Oh, yeah, to the move topological. And this is what's great about this. I'm gonna turn off a few subtools just because I'm also going to the lowest one, lowest subdivision level. And I'm gonna turn off all the fibers. So this fur coat and the beard. There we go. So you'll see here there is some intersection, some things going on. Actually, before I do that, let's just tweak this really quickly. So I'm just pushing this forward a bit, and because the fiber mesh itself for the fur coat is in a separate subtool, this is gonna look a little bit weird, but we'll cover it. So let's have a look. That's not too bad. Here I'm just tweaking the underlying geometry of the fiber mesh of the fur coat. Alright, let's turn that off again, and let's select the Nanomesh. So what's great about this technique of using the Nanomesh is that those are just particles, like I said, or instances of that little tube that are placed on top of this the move brush or the move topological, and move this thing around, and all I'm doing is just repositioning some of the underlying polygons, but I'm not affecting the mesh. So in other words, I can increase this like so, and then obviously I'm increasing the sizing or the stretching of these polygons here. If I turn this on and off. So right now, let's say, let's turn double. Come on. No. All right. So hopefully we didn't lose too much. All right. Cool. Let me just try to recover this, and if not, I will just leave it there because I think I showed you a few of the techniques that I wanted to show you in this stream. And I don't know, it's been a little bit, a few accidents. Now it's gonna be here we go, this one here. No, we didn't lose too much. Alright, so I'm just gonna finish here to show you this. So let's go ahead and select again the move topological. So if I just change the size of these polygons, that's what I was talking about, ZBrush is gonna reposition or is maintaining the amount of nanomesh that is placed within these areas. So this is really powerful. I'm gonna undo that because you can go ahead and do things like this, you know, push things around, and it's just gonna, you know, you're gonna keep all of these particles or instances attached to the geometry. So this is something that you can do as well for the fur coat, for example, if you're doing something like what we did for the other part of the body or the clothes. But if you use fiber mesh, then you can, sorry, if you use nanomesh, you can still manipulate the underlying geometry and then get a better result. I'll give you a quick example in just a second. Just want to make sure I finish tweaking this, what I wanted to do, because this is kind of what I wanted. So I think it's looking good. Let's go ahead and turn on the rest of the stuff, the beard and the fur coat. Alright, so that's looking good. So the alternative would be if you select this mesh. Let's go into solo mode, right? Let's go ahead and select maybe a cylinder as well. Make it a polymesh 3D, and this is going to be really quickly just to wrap up today's, because it's been a bit long. So I'm just going to scale this up like so, and I'm going to bring in the taper deformer. I'm just going to make it sharper like this, and then use the white cone to change the shape. Click accept, and probably scale this down and even up a bit. So essentially what I'm doing in this case is create a fiber, like a single fiber, or the equivalent of a single fiber. And then we can use something like the bend curve that we already talked about. And now it's creating these points in the middle, but we can just change the axis to be the y-axis with this little cone here, and create a few more points. And again, same deal. Right, so I'm just gonna try to replicate the kind of like the look of the current fur coat and what we did with the fiber mesh, but with a different technique, which is Nanomesh. Cool, so we have this very simple fiber. Click accept. We can probably simplify it quite a bit. So let's use the C modeler and do the same technique, the manual technique that I just showed you. Hover over the edge, delete, edge loop complete. So I'm gonna it's just gonna make it a little bit messy, but we'll get rid of this base in a bit. So this one is gonna be quite low polygon, just because we're gonna use more of this. All right, I think that's not too bad. Obviously the bottom, I'm just gonna check the top part, and that's fine. Cool, and we can just select this bit, embed that, and delete hidden. Cool. So again, it's super simple, and we can actually, I mean, it should already be good, but I can just simplify it a bit more. Alright, maybe that is too much. Let's just slide these ones. Slide the edge loop complete so that it's not as blocky. I mean, it doesn't matter the technique that you use to get to this point, really, or to get to this stage. You can do anything you want. Just wanted to show you a different technique, and that is quite fast, just from a single tube getting this. And let's go ahead and position the camera to the way that we want to create the fibers. So in this case, I want them to be sticking out like so. In fact, we can just use another deformer. Let's just to make it a bit more random. Select the bend arc, and I'm just gonna change this tiny bit like this. Accept, and then we can rotate it a bit like so. Alright, so from this angle, now I'm gonna create a new insert brush, so repeating the same process as the ones that we did for the beads, like the scarf type of thing. And let's create Nanomesh brush from this. Perfect. So now we can go back to our character, and we're gonna use the same technique, but this time the fibers are gonna be just instances of Nanomesh. So it's just gonna give us a slightly different look, and depending on the project that you're working on, maybe this is a better way to approach it. So I don't remember who asked about the feathers. So this might be a way to apply a bunch of feathers, so you can create a very detailed feather and then apply it as a Nanomesh, maybe. Comics Legend, could you also start off with a polymesh and initialize the cylinder for from the beginning, lower topology instead of deleting edges? Absolutely, that would be a better way to do it. Yeah, so you can just start with almost like a pentagon, really, which is five 5 sides, and then that will save you that step of deleting geometry and fixing it. But you know, sometimes I overcomplicate things just to test different stuff. But all right, so we have this fiber. I'm gonna right click on the mesh and make sure that all polygons are selected so that it is applied to everything. And I'm gonna click and drag, and we have these spikes. Great. So they're just going through. They're kind of like halfway embedded. So we can take the offset and the Z offset and just push that, just to get them out a bit, not all the way. Great. And then we can use, I mean, the alignment in this case doesn't really matter because we're going to use randomness. So I'm going to turn off the polyframe and maybe double. In this case, this is another thing that you can use. Remember, the double is very important for fiber mesh, but in this case of Nanomesh is not as relevant because the instances are going to be applied over the direction of the normal. So in this case, the normals are pointing outwards, and that's why these ones are, or the particles or instances, whatever you're going to call it, this wiggly line or the fibers are pointing outwards. So let's increase the randomness quite a bit. Right, so we just populated this with Nanomesh, and it's quite fast. It's actually less geometry than fibers, I think, in this case. But it looks too manufactured. It looks too, you know, all of these ones are, if you pay attention to this area, they're two kind of like the same thing, right? So here's where we're going to start tweaking this. So the first one is let me just bring this up really quickly. And we went over like an hour. I think I'm going to wrap it up after this one because we went over time quite a bit. All right. So I mean, I'm going to explain this just because it's an important concept that you can, once you know the basics, you can leverage all the capabilities of it. So let's say that this is just a single polygon, right? And this is the normal of the polygon, so it's shooting up, right? Or it's pointing outwards, which is currently what is happening here. When you create one of these fibers, so let's say this is the little fiber, right? It's pointing upwards along the normal as well of the polygon. So if you don't use the randomness, it's going to be one of these single fibers per polygon that you have in the underlying geometry, right? So because this is pointing outwards, then this is going to be the Z-axis. So that's why offset, when we use the Z-axis, so in other words, yeah, let's say this is the Z-axis, and depending on where you see it, you'll have the X-axis, and then you'll have the Y-axis, right? So everything that is set is just going to be tweaking the fiber in this axis, right? So this one and the one that I'm going to change is the rotation and variation in the Z-axis. So that means that I'm going to take this fiber and I can just rotate it over its axis, over the Z-axis, and I can add some randomness of it so that we don't have this area or these areas that are like very evident that is the same mesh, right? Once we finish with that, we can also use the height, which is the equivalent to the Z-axis, right? And variate the height so that way we have a bunch of different, you know, variations in the height of the fiber. So hopefully that makes sense. Let's go ahead and do that. So rotation in Z, you see it's just rotating the fibers around, giving us this cool effect. I wish you could animate this, that would be awesome. Alright, so let's just add rotation to something that looks kind of cool, and then we can add variation to that rotation, right? And then we can just keep playing around. And this is why I like to show, well, I wanted to show you this technique because you have a lot of control over the placement of it. So you have to do less grooming in a way. You can just control all the placement with the fiber mesh and just pushing the polygons. Another thing we can add, just add a bit of rotation in the X, and this is just gonna completely change things around, which is pretty cool. So let's go for something like that and just add variation as well. Maybe reduce the Z variation a bit. So I'm just playing with the rotation of that single strand of hair to create this effect. So I think that's looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and play with the height. So I'm just gonna add a bit more and then add variation to the height. And then we can take the overall size and just bring it down a bit. Increase the random distribution to add more polygons. Change the size a bit as well. And yeah, I think that's looking pretty good. Now, if you want to make it, I mean that's all really. That's the technique that I wanted to show you. We can scale it a bit more actually to see the rest of the model. And I think that looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and increase the width just to make it a bit fatter, and the length as well. So in this case, the width and the length are the ones that are concerned with the X and the Y axis of our little strand. So you can just make it fatter, like an inflate, basically, using these two. Alright, and if you want to make this even more complex and even more intricate, what you can do is create 3 or 4 of these different strands. So ones that are curly, ones that are like straight, and so on and so forth, and then applied multiple instances of the nanomesh over the same geometry, and you'll get something really, really cool. So I'm gonna leave it here, guys, because we went over a bit of time and we had some technical issues. So I'm gonna try to clean this up and just show you in the next week live stream what the end result is, or how I went to cut some of the parts that I show you that I wanted to show, that I wanted to cut. But I'll leave it here. I just want to bring in everything and turn off the fibers so you see the difference. So it's a little bit more, a little bit. What was the word? A bit more manufactured, a bit more consistent. But I think for this character, I like the fibers, the exaggerated stuff. So there you have it. It's a little bit different. Again, the good thing about the nanomesh is that those fibers or those strands of hair are attached to the geometry. So with fiber mesh, when you create a fiber mesh, it becomes a separate thing. It becomes a subtool. Whereas with nanomesh, you can just do this type of thing. So you can just take the move brush and then just push this up, and then you can exaggerate this quite a bit, right? And the fibers are going to be stuck to the geometry. So that's the great thing about this nanomesh technique. Cool. So again, I'm gonna leave it there. What I'll do is I'm gonna turn off nanomesh. This is another thing that is quite good. Nanomesh is just a preview or an instance, so you can turn it off like so and use the fiber mesh. But if for some reason you want to go back or want to have a side-by-side comparison, you can just turn that on and off, the nanomesh. So let me just go to the highest subdivision level of everything. I'm just gonna do a quick save as well and get out of perspective, or turn on perspectives really, and let's do a quick render to see how everything is looking. And the render is going to help us smooth out some of these fibers as well. There we go. So that's it for today, guys. Thank you for stopping by. Let me see the chat if you have any last minute questions. A little bit of the topic. Hang on, I think I'm missing a few of those. Okay, a little out of topic, but any good tips of making good UV maps on a cylinder? Every time I unwrap, it doesn't turn out as the rectangle, that the two caps, instead the edges are all screwed up. I would assign different polygroups to each cap and to the cylinder itself, and that should give you a pretty decent result. Otherwise, for that type of things, I'm beginning to use more other software like Rhizome UV, and it's pretty easy. But the UV master will give you a pretty good result if you select polygroups and if you turn on. So if you assign polygroups and you leave the polygroups on and also symmetry, that will give you a pretty decent result. This bit looks complicated. No, it's not complicated. It's just the look of it. But once you get the steps, it's not as complicated. Can these fibers be groomed as well or not because they're nanomesh? Well, they cannot be groomed as fibers, but you can potentially create fibers as the insert brush. So you can create a little clump of fibers where you groom them and then turn that into an insert brush and then apply them in the same way. So they look, it's like you're getting the best of both worlds, really. There is actually, I tried this technique a few streams ago. I don't remember where. If you go through the different episodes of my streams, there is one, cannot remember where it was, but basically I showed you how to combine those two, nanomesh and fiber mesh, and then you can still groom them. I don't remember where it is. Cool. So thanks. Need what I need for my project. Great. Thank you guys for stopping by. Great stream. Awesome. Great. So looks like again we went over for like, what was it, 3 hours today, so quite long, but anyway, I'm having lots of fun with this, and thank you so much for stopping by and checking this out. Like I said, I'm gonna try to finish this and wrap it up. The rest of the stuff that I want to do with this guy is pretty minor, pretty repetitive actions like sculpting, adding alphas to just detail some of these areas. So I will do that kind of like off camera, and then next stream I'll show you what I did and how I did it, kind of like a breakdown, and we can hopefully do something else, maybe start a different project, because this one is being dragging for like for a whole month, for 4 weeks working on this character. So I'm just gonna call it finish in terms of the stream, and then the rest I'll just do it afterwards. But yeah, so thank you so much for stopping by. I will see you next week. Hopefully we'll start something else. And like I said, if you wanna know a little bit more about the clothes and drapery, I added the link before. Let me just I lost it. Anyway, I put it in the chat. you can check it, or just Google clothes and drapery course in ZBrush, or just clothes and drapery course. I'm pretty sure it will be there. Or in the ZBrush guides, you can just filter by course when you go to the tutorials page, and it will be there. And that gives you, I mean, if you get the course, it gives you access to those brushes and the different, a more in-depth explanation of how I go about creating this type of clothes and yeah, all these assets for a character. Other than that, I'll see you next week, and stay tuned because I have some really cool stuff to share with you guys in the coming weeks. I don't know if any of you guys are in the newsletter that I've been showing some cool tips as I work on my own projects. I like to document stuff and share some tips. So I have a couple of really cool ones coming up in the next weeks that I'm just fine-tuning in terms of the NPR filters and things like that. All to do with compositing and finalizing your sculpture or taking it to the next level. So if you're not, just go ahead and sign up, and I'll just send you an email. That's pretty much it. All right, guys. So I'm gonna wrap it up here, and I'll see you next week. And enjoy your weekend. Have a good one. Cheers, guys.